Now that we understand what chinuch is, that the teacher and the parent has to be able to bring out all of these things in a child, so now look what we're going to learn. When you want to figure out, you want to choose a good mechanech. Just like normally, if you want to hire an English teacher, you're going to say, what's your curriculum? What's his span? What age is he a bucky in? What can he really teach, right? But he's saying over here, it's more than that. You have to know that this mechanech, this parent and the mechanech, has to go ahead and have depth to be able to be mechanech each child in the limud that they're learning, but also in the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama of each child. And a simple mechanech hapashut, she'en lo musig b'teiras hachinuch, a regular mechanech doesn't have these supernatural abilities, and he doesn't understand how to bring out the connection that the child should grow each year, not just in reading and math and history, but also in his connection, his hecherkeit, becoming an elevated person in his nefesh, controlling his desires, his ruach. His ruach means that he should be a spiritual-minded person, and his neshama connecting on infinite levels. He won't be able to understand. A regular person can't understand the difference between the ikr and the tafel. And then what's going to happen? He's going to spend the whole year with a kid in third grade, let's say, and he's going to spend the whole year on the tafel, on the secondary things, and miss out on the ikr. Because the tafel is the curriculum that we know of. You're going to have to teach them Chumash this year. You have to teach them how to read, teach them Rashi, teach them Taisvis, English subjects. But the tafel, that's really the tafel. The ikr is on the other stuff, developing the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. And this can be very dangerous. Yesh shenikra mechanech toiv. There are people who have a reputation as being a great mechanech. Why? Kiven shematzliach l'chanech es hayeled liyos bal seder mashmas. This person, this parent, or this teacher, great reputation. What does he do? When you walk into the classroom, everybody's acting orderly. They're organized. They're obedient. The kids get up, and he taught them, right, like little marching guys, how to go down the hallway, and everybody behaves perfectly. Afkila mito shel davar. You want to know the truth? B'chlal ein mechanech. He's not an educator. Ela shemamali tafkid shel shoiter toiv. He's just a good policeman. Someone who's a good policeman, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's a good mechanech. There's two separate things. Avada in the beginning, you can't teach if everybody's jumping on the seats and throwing paper airplanes and spitting at each other. There's an element of getting everybody to be orderly and obedient, but that's only the introduction so that you can be a mechanech. So a lot of times people do that. A lot of parents are that way. You have parents who b'chlal are not mechanchim at all. They don't imbue into the child anything to raise their connection to Hashem, to tap into their nefesh, ruach, and neshama. But at my Shabbos table, nobody moves. You don't get up and you don't throw, and he's a policeman. And they say, look, I have 8 kids around the table. Compared to other people where kids are jumping around, he's doing a really good job. My Shabbos table, it's like, everybody's very nice. You're a good shoter tov. You're a good policeman. You know how to threaten and control that everybody should sit there. But that is only the introduction to make them love the Shabbos table, to make them love Yiddishkeit. I have so many people that I've worked with off the derech who said that was the ruach around their Shabbos table. They knew they had to sit, and they did. And the father and mother thought, we did our job. We got our kid to sit through the Shabbos table. And they were able to leave sometimes and then come back, and they didn't stand on the chair, they didn't take things out of, they made them perfect. And the parents are so proud of themselves. The problem is the kid hates Shabbos. The kid has no connection to Zmiris. Father never taught the child the words of the Zmiris, never connected them to the beauty of Shabbos. Nothing with the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. I think he's saying such a fantastic point. We look at it like there's a guf, make him into a mensch. That's true. You can't avoid that. If you don't do that, you're going to have a wild animal. But what about the nefesh, the self-control, the ruach, to teach them hecherkeit? You do that on the way to shul. You do that telling Maises Sipuri Tzadikim about how there's a story, I think it was of Shlomo Karlina, I'm not sure who it was. There's a story of a big tzaddik when he was a little kid, probably 5 or 6 years old. His father came into the room and saw him holding a cookie and crying. He said, why are you holding a cookie and crying? What are you doing? He said, I'm starving. I really want this cookie. He says, so why are you crying? He says, because they taught me that if you really want something, you shouldn't do it. See, this kid he already was taught at a young age, nicht alles was man will, right? So he already had that training of self-control, that because I want it, I should have self-control not to have it, but I'm a little kid and I want my cookie. So he's sitting there crying, and yet he's not eating the cookie. We cannot do that with do not try this at home. You'll have psychotic children. But a little bit to teach that, you know what, if you can, according to the right age, without being tough, without shoving it down the throat, it doesn't work. The shoter part works with toughness. The nefesh, ruach, and neshama part, this is the chiddush, only works with being gentle. Otherwise, you'll never access the nefesh, ruach, and neshama at all of the child. There's a wall. You don't even know. He's sitting there shaking his head. You didn't get anywhere. It can only be done sweetly, right? So you're walking your kid to shul, a little kid, and you tell him a story of tzaddikim, and you say, you know what, sometimes when you want something very badly, push it off a few minutes. Hashem likes when we have self-control. That's amazing. That's amazing. I wrote in GPS a story of my own son, that he was about 10 years old, and he decided he wanted to go on a diet, which I don't recommend. It was his own thing. He was very chubby. He wanted to go on a diet, on his own. And he told me, he said, Tati, I feel so good. I said, why? He said, I'm on a diet, and I opened up the refrigerator, and there was Coca-Cola there. And I really wanted to drink the Coke. And I didn't. 10 years old. He understood. He understood how good it feels to not give in to your ratzon. He said, I felt so good. But which part of him? It wasn't the guf that felt, it was the nefesh. He had self-control. That's the secret to happiness. I hope one day I can be like him. So far I haven't mastered it. But he felt that. I want the Coke, but there's something I had more than that, self-control, and he had more pleasure from not having the Coke than he would have if he would have had the Coke. Different pleasure, because the pleasure of the guf, where it ends, that's where the nefesh begins. The nefesh, ruach, and neshama, like the 5 levels of pleasure from Rav Noach Weinberg, right? You read that. So what is real education? This mechanech toiv is a great reputation. You walk in, you see 30 kids over there, they don't move, they sit, everybody says, wow, that's a great mechanech. Says the Nesivei Shalom, that's not chinuch. That's the introduction to chinuch. You need to have order in the court. You have to have order and peace. But you also have to have kids that, in order to make that order, if you shut them down, then you're not going to have the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. So you have to have the shoter tov in a way that doesn't shut off the kids either. You insult the kid and you shut him down, then the whole day, yeah, he's listening, but he's not internalizing anything on a nefesh level, a ruach level, or a neshama level. So that's not real chinuch. So what is real chinuch? Ki chinuch amiti. This is one of my favorite pieces in the Nesivei Shalom. Real true chinuch, einoi lahachriach es hachanich bekoyach lehis nahagus tova. It's not to pressure with control and strength. It's not to pressure the child, the student, to behave properly. Ela tzarich lahavi yosei. You have to bring him lidei kach sheyirtze b'zeh. Like I always tell you, you don't want your child to wear a yarmulke. You want your child to want to wear a yarmulke. Lahavi lidei kach sheyirtze b'zeh. We have to make them want what we want. As long as you're forcing them, it's a lot of work, and it's never going to end. You're going to force them and force them and force them. But if you spend that time to imbue in them that their ratzon, that nefesh, that their internal being wants what you want, you never have to be pulling that anymore. He wants to go in that direction. Then you help steer him. That's chinuch, giving advice. But if he wants to go that way and you're pulling him this way, you're never going to win. Chinuch amiti einoi lahachriach es hachanich bekoyach lehis nahagus tova. You have to remember this. That's not real chinuch. To pressure, force, control children to do something today. It's lahavi yosei kedei sheyirtze b'zeh. Now lahavi yosei means I'm not going to win him today. Today, on this day, when he's 6 years old, on this Shabbos, when I take him to shul, he's not going to daven necessarily if he's not in it. It's lahavi yosei, could take many years. Savlanos, patience. But that's your job. You have to bring the child to want these values that you feel are important. to want to daven, to want to behave the way that you want him to behave. Remember that. And that's not something that happens on the spot. That's an investment, that's patience. You have to be thought out, you have to be careful, you have to be calm, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. That's chinuch amiti. The short win of getting the kid to do now when he doesn't want to, it may feel good. You could log in your book, did chinuch, but you may have done the opposite. Why? Because if chinuch amiti is lahavi oisei sheyirtze b'zeh, to bring the child one day to want it, and if you don't do that because you're doing the forced chinuch, he's not going to want it one day. So it's better if you would have done nothing, you wouldn't have made him want, let's say, to daven, but he wouldn't also hate davening. Reb Chaim Kanievsky writes that there are a lot of parents that they're very holy and they love davening. So they pressure their kids to daven before the child is mature enough to want to daven. And because they're pushing, and the kid's not ready, and they're pushing, that pushing creates that they hate davening. They could be frum and learn, but they have an internal sinna to tefillah. Why? It says tefillah comes in each person when they mature and they realize, I'm talking to Hashem. A lot of people don't daven until they're in crisis and they're older and they all of a sudden realize, I have to talk to Hashem. Some kids, and I saw one kid, I remember growing up, I saw this kid, he loved to daven. If you think about it, it's a little strange because he has no idea what he's saying. He's a little kid, and he's going like this for 3 hours. His mom is just shuckling, and it's beautiful. I was staring at him. I said, I want to go to him for a bracha. Everybody's proud of him. His father's proud of him. His mother's proud of him. The Rebbe, everybody's proud. But if you think about it, it's beautiful, but it's a little strange because he doesn't know what these words mean. So if you go ahead and you live like that, and you're saying Chinese words, you don't know what it means, and you're all into it, you don't know how long that's going to last. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't have done that. It was wonderful, but that's not tefillah. That's computer, that's, I don't know, that's like a person on autopilot. It's just a good kid, right? We should all have at least one of those. They just do what you're supposed to. Shimon Russell calls them APK, an autopilot kid. Gewaldig, from Hashem. But that has nothing to do with talking to Hashem, what tefillah really is, Dvarim Shebelev, that when he's 30 years old, he's going to, yes or no, be into tefillah. So when you push them, not only is it not chinuch amiti because you didn't lahavi oisei kadesh yirtze b'zeh, but the actual pressure, especially on kids today in our generation, leaves them a bad taste in their mouth towards that thing, no matter what the thing is. Right? If you're a Yankee fan and you're late to the game and you really want to be there on time and you make your kid miserable over it and you're angry the whole way there, I told you we're going to be late, whatever, the kid is going to hate Yankee games. It's not just about tefillah and davening and spirituality. It's about anything. When you use the pressure and you knock the kid because this thing is so important and you're ruining it, then how could you? It puts in the kid a bad taste. And once someone has a bad taste, if you have a bad taste for steak, no matter how expensive and how wonderful steak is, you're never going to enjoy a steak. So it poisons the child forever, for a long time, right? And that's the opposite of chinuch. I was in shul a couple of years ago. I went to visit somebody else in Borough Park, and I davened in the shul over there. This guy came in with 3 kids. Young kids, all dressed, matching, very cute kids. And he had one next to him, the older one, then the middle one, then the younger one. These kids were basically 10, 8, and 6. And this guy got, and he started, he got in position for davening. He's davening. And for the next half hour straight, every time the kid in front of him, 6-year-old little kid, started spacing out, no. A nightmare. He took this kid. I wanted to take the kid away. I wanted to kidnap him. Because there's no way he'll grow up normal. And certainly won't grow up liking to daven. He's a little kid. He wasn't 18, where we could debate what you should do, or 13, where we can debate. He was a little kid. He wasn't mature enough to stare with his finger into place. He was looking around. He wasn't doing anything wrong. And his father is baking in a hatred for tefillah. And I have absolutely it's not even a doubt, I have no shaila in the world, that in 20 years from now, hopefully, with this father, I don't know where the kid will be. But let's say he's alive, and he's frum, and he's erlich, and he's the best guy in Koil. I am sure he'll say, I don't know why, I just hate davening. Because he put in a terrible taste of davening by pressuring a child to do something before they're mature enough to do it. That's when you're dealing with the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. It's an edele zach.